Welcome to Montreal Rocks. I'm your host, Randal, and today we're with a band that I found on Instagram called False Heads. And today we're with Luke Griffiths. Now, it's one of those times when the actual Instagram marketing worked. I clicked on the link and instantly I got sucked into the sound. It reminded me right away of that 90s, 2000-ish, like a prong meets like a modern Caius of sorts. It's heavy, but it's fun. And if you don't know who they are, check them out. I'll have a video up in the show notes. Let's just say that when the ex-manager of the Ramones, Danny Fields, calls them one of the best live bands in the world, you have to take notice. Or when Iggy Pop says they're young and talented and going places. If they come to my town, I'd show up for that. If they come to your town, you might want to show up. That's pretty high praise, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, you can't really ask for more than that, to be perfectly honest. There's two quotes.
Yeah. I always like to start a conversation talking about your origin story. I want to find out where this all kind of happened. I know that the three of you, it's Luke, Jake, and Barney. You're all friends from a long time ago, friends from school. But let's talk about you. I want you to picture yourself as a small child. Maybe you're looking through your parents' record collection, and I want to see. Was there a time where music kind of became more important in your life? Maybe when you found a music that spoke to you as opposed to just listening to what everybody else was listening to?
Yeah, definitely. I sort of had a two-pronged thing with music. My first sort of real love was kind of um, Eminem. Probably when I was about 10, 11. I just thought it was like so rebellious, and he spoke about stuff that I hadn't really heard in pop music before. And considering he was one of the biggest sort of pop acts in terms of popularity, I just thought it was like astonishing. So the Slim Shady LP and the Marshall Mathers LP when I was like 10 to 12 was sort of all I listened to really, because it was just different from what was on the radio. And then around 15, 16, kind of rock and roll was what like made me start to want to make music. It was my auntie was a big Nirvana fan, and she lent me Nevermind, and then I was like, what is this? This is just like, I've never heard anything like this before. I mean, I'd kind of heard Teen Spirit like everyone had, but listening to the album, and then from there it was sort of like OK Computer, and I was like, I can't believe there's all this music out there that I'd never listened to. And my dad gave me some of his Dylan records and Beatles records, and then it was like Pixies and Elliott Smith, all between the ages of like 15 to 18, really. So they were the artists that really sort of shaped me. But it sort of started at Eminem, and then yeah, like Nirvana and Radiohead was sort of that spark, really.
I know that the Pixies was one of those influential bands. When you hear "Where Is My Mind," even today, what's going through your mind when you hear that song? Like, bring us.
It's
Is it bring back a memory or?
yeah. It's one of my favorite songs. I still think it's one of the best songs ever written. Um, I just remember sort of it was one of the songs I first started to jam on with my friends, and around that time I started to get into like film and literature. So obviously, the classic lit at the end of Fight Club,
Mm.
but it was sort of in the same sort of year really where I listened to Surfer Rosa for the first time, and then I watched Fight Club, which kind of made it like next level famous. So I suppose my memories of it were really just sort of playing it in my room with my friends Darian and Jake at the time, who would then I'd make a band with later in life. So yeah, it brings back sort of being around 15, 16, to be honest.
Wouldn't it be nice if all our credit cards got burnt away in those buildings, just like back in the movie?
Exactly. Yeah, it would definitely be a much better world, I think.
Well, I mean, let's talk about finances. You grew up in the east of London with your three friends from school. Uh, in Montreal, I'm in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and we have the wealthy that live in the west, and we have the poor that live in the east. It always seems to be the east. How was it growing up in that neighborhood? And what was the biggest lesson that you kept from growing up in a neighborhood that was maybe not as wealthy as the others?
Well, we've all had kind of a weird experience, I think, where all of our families were from really working class parts of the East End, kind of like East End villain territory. My family was from Canning Town. I was born in Newham Hospital. Jake was from Seven Kings, and Barney was from East Ham. And then it's that sort of thing where all of our families got, a better job or a better financial situation, and we all sort of moved out to a more kind of middle class area just on the outskirts of East London. So we sort of had that weird bridging of the gap where we were all like the first kids to go to university, and we come from that, that kind of working class world. And I remember we'd go back when we moved to Upminster. When I moved to Upminster, we'd go back to Canning Town where my family was. I used to feel really grateful that, my mum and dad had done all they could to sort of move me out of that world to try and give me a better opportunity at life. So we've always had that weird perspective of not many families or kids manage to do that because the class system is, horrible and almost just an unrelenting cycle. So I think we've got quite a unique perspective of it where I didn't really feel like, I always felt like I didn't fully fit in at uni. They all seemed very posh and from like the more classical middle classes, upper middle classes, but I wasn't, we'd come out of that world, of that working class world. So it was just, I don't think it's any coincidence that us three are in a band, put it that way. I think it's probably a reason we gravitated towards each other.
Hey, the birth of punk was all about the class system, everything that was happening anyway in the UK. But it's funny that you gravitated toward all these US bands. So you're kind of already trying to escape the reality of the life that you were, and looking at the US maybe for some inspiration on what could be possible. Not that any place is perfect. We all have our neighborhoods that are worse off than others. None of us are living the perfect life. Do you think that those experiences of growing up and moving around? I mean, Camden Town is a great place. I've been to London once. I loved Camden Town. It was just so artistic. There's like all these cool shops. Do you think that it gave you an edge over maybe the bands today that have everything given to them? They haven't had to struggle to make music.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the weird thing. I mean, I can't pretend that I had a really rough, time. We moved out when I was small. Jake and Barney moved out a bit later on, around 11, 12, and my parents did that to give me a better education, to go to a better school, which wasn't a private school, but the schools that my dad and mum went to, was just almost pointless in those sort of areas. And so I had a good education, and I just always thought it was interesting, the dynamic between when I'm sort of involved in that world and I went to university and then we went to the music industry, and I was just always grateful that we'd moved out of a poor area to an area where it gave me more opportunities. And a lot of kids don't have that, but then to be faced with the people in the music industry, which are, if we're all being completely honest, they're from the seriously wealthy. I mean, the music industry now is just full of kids that are extremely posh, never really had a job, have had everything handed them to a plate. A lot of them are privately educated, and a lot of them, they've all got mums or dads in the music industry. I mean, that is just the reality of what it is now. So I don't really know how many artists that were poorer than us or didn't manage to have parents that got better jobs to move out and give their kids those opportunities, how they could even do it now, because we all have to work full-time jobs. We've all done horrible jobs. We've always worked, and you go into the music industry and it's like their dads and mums are paying their rents in like Camden and central London, in all these gentrified areas. They've all got influence and parents in the music industry. I think hip hop and grime are the only genres left where it seems to be, you can come from a working class family, you can come from a poor area, and there's a support system there and people want to see it. I think rock and roll in particular now, it's a very, very middle class endeavor now. It's like, even the accents you come across, it's like they all speak like the Queen. It's a strange world. It's a bit depressing really, but I gravitate towards punk as well. I mean, like the Sex Pistols and the Clash were two bands that I really got into. London Calling and Nevermind the Bollocks I thought were phenomenal, but there's just something I identified with kind of Kurt and Radiohead, to be fair, who are British, and the Pixies, I just thought their lyrics and Elliott Smith, I think I was sort of starting to proper deal with my mental health that I'd sort of realised that I'd been struggling with since I was about 10. And I just sort of gravitated towards that, I think, in particular. But yeah, the class system in the music industry is it's widening as well. It's like it feels like a wealth gap in itself. It's the kids there that are coming through are just, you very rarely meet someone that has a regional accent, I think, anyway.
I find that a lot of musicians use music, especially the lyrics, to express themselves and to maybe clarify thoughts in their head. You talked about mental health. I'm seeing a lot of links between a lot of the good bands. The ones that at least I can really connect to are the ones that speak from a place of truth. I think if you have everything handed to you, it might be hard to have that experience. But you might be able to you might be a great musician. But I think I resonate more with people who maybe discuss their struggles. They're open about how they feel, and we might not feel the same way, but we can at least identify with some of the thoughts. We might even take the thoughts and apply them to ourselves in a totally different way, and that's okay, I think.
I think I mean, there's some elements that are transcendent. I mean, Radiohead famously, they were all privately educated, and I don't try and see any, if the music's brilliant and it speaks to me, it speaks to me. I don't purposely try and go out to like work out where they're from. I love NWA and Mobb Deep, and I love Radiohead. So like, it's not a thing like that. But I think it's a bit of a problem when it's so orientated around that world now, where we're having good conversations in a lot of ways about, diversity and stuff, but we're not, for some reason, we don't seem to talk about class almost at all when it comes to sort of the entertainment industry. Like the awards dues, you see celebrities walk up there and say something about representation, and I get all of that. I think their conversation's worth having, but no one wants to talk about the elephant in the room, which is so many musicians and actors that come through seem to be related to someone else in the industry. I mean, on the top of my head, I'm trying to think of a young actor that's working class. I think John Boyega is probably the only one that I can think of that he was from Stratford, which wasn't far from where I was born. And yeah, it's just a weird thing. And I think it's because in reality that structure has grown, especially in rock and roll. I think probably since the financial crash, probably since a little bit more than that, and they don't really want to talk about the fact that a lot of their privilege has come from class. I think that's something that is going on anyway.
Well, let's go back to your band and how you've kind of, like, I mean, your name is False Heads, but you kind of had a false start, right? You're this hot new band. You've got all these accolades. There's plans in play to, reveal you to the world in 2020, and COVID-19 hits.
Yeah,
it was that's a punch to the stomach, man. Like, how did you push forward despite this detour?
It was very frustrating, obviously. We've been working for 4 or 5 years. As I say, we've all been doing horrible jobs, delivery drivers, labouring, leafleting, working in pubs to sort of try and make it work. It got to a point where we felt like, we'd got the album on a record label, we'd got our agent, we've got all the team, everything in place that we've been sort of working for 5 years. And we'd had a couple of problems with some other record labels. I mean, we were like 21 when we first signed a record deal. We thought that was going to be brilliant, and that fell apart. We had a couple of legal battles there. We was like, so get to a point, and then the pandemic happens. It just sort of felt like, the universe was trying to tell us something. But we took a couple of months off. Our manager was just like, look, just chill out for a little bit, get your head straight. And we released the album on the Friday. On the Monday, the whole country, the UK, was locked down, and then the following week, most of the world was locked down. So we just sort of had to reevaluate, and then we just sort of put a plan together. We started running some social media campaigns, which are pretty much, part and parcel of most album campaigns anyway. And then put together a plan. We sort of slowly started re-releasing it about a month ago, 2 months ago. We'll be doing a repress of the vinyl because most of the original vinyl's gone. And yeah, we just sort of picked ourselves up, started writing, formulated a plan over a year, and we sort of know where we're going to go now. Obviously, fingers crossed, depending on the COVID situation, but we have a rough idea of where we're going to go. And yeah, we've just sort of started recording tracks for the second album. So, you know, somehow we managed to come to come through on the other side.
So the album we're talking about is the one behind me. It's all here, but you're dreaming. Were you able to kind of rework some of the tracks the way you wanted them?
Yeah, because we'd sort of again, because the industry's changed. I think a lot of people have like the sort of image in their head that you get signed and you get given $100,000, you quit your job, and then you can record loads of demos and you get chucked in and do your first album. But it's not really like that anymore. So we recorded a couple of EPs on the first label we signed to, first indie label we signed to, and we'd done an all right job, but there was not a load of budget. So we got a producer who we really liked called Johnny, and he did the best that he could, put them out. And then for the album, we were like, let's take some of the old songs. We finally got a chance to do the album and rework them. So that's what we did. And then we wrote about 5 new tracks and put them on. I thought it was a nice mismatch, and not a mismatch, but it was a nice match of like our old songs and our journey until that point. So I think it gave the album like a kind of a journey of where we
Almost
started.
a historical record of your time up to that point. It's really interesting to see the contrasting genres. I also like the fact that you talk about dreaming. You've mentioned before that you experienced night terrors and sleep paralysis, and that reality can sometimes get mixed up. What today do you feel people are mistaking dream for reality?
Well, I think most dreams don't come true, but nightmares do. I think that's sort of a lot of the themes on the album. And yeah, I've always had night terrors and sleep paralysis, so it was just sort of a lot of the album was kind of a reflection of how dreaming can mean a number of different things, and how kind of your dreaming and your nightmares sort of process a lot of what's going on, and sometimes kind of the external world and your own internal thought process align in ways that you kind of don't want to. Social media's got a lot to do with that. I think that's a big theme on the album. And to the question that you've just asked, I think that's a big part of it. I think with beginning to, it's almost like a dream, the way that we communicate through social media. It's so fractured and disconnected, and we're having like really heavy important conversations about the world and politics in like 140 characters back and forth between each other. It's like a dream. It's like you can't elaborate on that. It's like a dream's like a set thing unless you lucid dreaming, and that's it. You know, it's like fractured and small, and that's part of what I was sort of trying to get across and what I was just thinking about. And I think that's a big part of it. I've kind of locked my Twitter now to a minute a day, so I just can only go on there, post a false heads thing. I quite like Instagram just because I can use it to communicate with our fans. I don't follow anyone on there. I got rid of Facebook. I think it's dangerous. And I think it's bad how we're so used to getting our information and news from there that like the news has even started, you know, like
Distorted,
but also collaborating that world of like, well, we need a news article that people on Twitter will read. We need a news article that people will look at the headline and get their information from. And I think that is, I think it's terrifying, to be honest. I mean, I know it's a bit of a cliche to moan about social media, but I think it is a weapon that we've given every single person. It's like everyone's got a detonator. And but above all that, there's like basically all of our news cycle is controlled by like 3 or 4 people in California. That's just a very strange time, and I kind of think it's only getting worse, really.
and I think the song 20 Nothing in your video, you're kind of contrasting. Anyway, this is my take on it. Might not be yours. You're kind of contrasting what is going on in the world, all this crazy stuff, like all these bombs going off, basically, and people getting distracted from the truth. You know, people are dancing. They're similar. You know, they're like oblivious to what's going on in the real world. Do you find people are actively ignoring their surroundings, and what should they do instead of ignore what's going around you?
Oh, 100%. Um, well, I think we're seeing the birth of like a lot of many different cults and religion. I mean, religion's another theme on that. I mean, obviously, I'm not a fan in the slightest of organized religion.
How
And
about disorganized religions?
sorry,
Just how about
yeah,
disorganized religions?
yeah, but we're sort of seeing more pop up. I think there's kind of like a weird, you know, and I am a lefty. I am of all left wing politics is something that I've always been interested in since like the age of 17, 18. I'd say I'm pretty far on the left, but there's kind of a weird sort of religion for the non-religious on the left popping up, very dogmatic, very sort of anti-humor and art, and quite totalitarian in some way, sort of disguised as tolerance. And then on the right now, where you'd associate more classical Abrahamic religions, there's kind of another spawn of that, which I think we saw under Trump, and this sort of alt-right QAnon world, which has come out of the internet in a lot of ways, but it's sort of a repackaged version of old school kind of Christian nationalism or whatever. And they're all kind of new, and they're all popping up and sort of repackaging old sort of forms of cults and religion, and the internet's just sort of popping them up all the time, popping them up, popping up, popping them up. And then in that world, there's like complete echo chambers because they're being fed the information that will either make them angry and sort of confirm their point, or give them information that will confirm their point.
It's that
And
manipulation from the social media that does all that. It's all
yeah,
the algorithms.
and they're also doing it to themselves. I mean, that's kind of the weird self-destructive nature of the algorithms. That's one of the reasons that I came off of it, because it was like I want to sort of try at least to find my own information and my own news sources to some degree and read an opinion that I don't agree with. And it's not possible all the time. But I just think people should try and do that a little bit more often. And people's kind of battle lines that they're drawing just seem to be creating more armies on the other side, and they're bolstering their own position in kind of a weird little box. And I kind of think, I think we're going to see more far right nationalism pop up after Trump. I don't think that's the end of it. I think we got let off lightly with Trump in a way. I think if he was younger and a bit more dynamic, that thing at the Capitol could have been worse. But yeah, it's just scary. It fills me with a bit of like an existential dread really most of the time. So I just sort of try my best to not think about it as much as I do. But it's yeah, it's a bit of a grim world at the minute, and I think it's getting worse.
If we think about specifically the crossing over of that violence and the music industry, we have to think about Bataclan. And
Mm.
interestingly enough, something so horrible when Nick Alexander was killed. He's the merch, he was at the merch booth for Eagles of Death Metal, and that was also a launching pad for you. Something that was like a great night for you guys. It was your big break. It's a Peaceful Noise concert, 2017, and I believe somebody canceled, so you actually had a much larger set. What was
Uh,
your favorite memory of that night? I mean,
it was just amazing. I mean, really, like that is sort of just horrible religious fascism versus beauty and art. I mean, that's kind of like horrible, narcissistic, mean-spirited people that blindly follow an ideology and are willing to kill over it, versus kind of the only thing that I think separates humanity from animals, which is art and music, and sort of those two things form togetherness. Well, I used to think that. I think even that's gone a bit astray, but it was just, yeah, I mean, and we became friends with Zoe. Zoe's been amazing. She's almost been like a mentor and a really good friend for us, friend to us. I have the utmost respect for her, and how she's dealt with that tragedy into something positive is probably something that I couldn't do, and I don't think there's loads of people that could. But it was just a beautiful night. It was just, again, it was sort of combating it in a way that is positive. Like, no, we're not going to cow to this, and we're going to put a show on, and we're going to celebrate life instead of death. And I think most religions celebrate death. I think they are death cults in a way. So it was just, yeah, it was an incredible evening, and I hope there's many more peaceful noises, which I know Zoe's working on for when COVID reopens to try and do some more. So yeah,
It's true that the music is something that is there to lift our spirits. I believe it's important for mental health, for us to kind of go through this pandemic, to have some sort of outlet. I think live music is such a beautiful way to have a communal experience, to feel, feel the sound go through your bones with a whole bunch of people in the room. It's a beautiful thing. I look forward to it happening again. And uh, I went to a concert the day after that happened, which is actually, it's kind of funny because I went to a Pill concert, PIL. I got to meet the infamous Johnny Rotten, and but it was still that strange feeling. You're going like, well, what if it happens here? Like, you kind of have that in the back of your mind, but I just wanted to not let it stop me. I think art has to live on, and I
yeah,
think music, like the even like you said, sometimes we have to talk about our nightmares, but in the end, once we release them, it leaves a place for us to have goodness come back in to us, and I hope that's what happens to you guys. You've got a lot ahead of you. You've got if the restrictions lift, we've just heard of how you're an amazing live band, so we can't wait for you to tour. What are you looking forward to? What will be your first song playing when you're that first show? What are you going to pick to be your first song?
we'll probably open with Whatever You Please. I think it's the opener on the album, and we open with it live a lot. So I think it'll be nice to sort of be like, we're starting from here. This is what we was meant to be doing a year ago. Well, it would be a year and a half by then. November is when we're going to be touring, which we'll be announcing probably next week. We're just finalising 2 or 3 of the last dates. So yeah, it'll be Whatever You Please, to sort of be like, right, this is where it was meant to start, and this is where we're going to start. And yeah, I'm literally can't wait. It's been so long. We've done a couple of live streams and they've been really fun. Obviously, it's not quite the same, but yeah, we just can't wait. It'll be what, 4, 5, well, quite a while away still, but yeah, it'll be amazing when it finally happens.
Oh, we wish you guys the best. We really hope to hear some new music soon. You've obviously got the ears of the world, and I'm looking forward to great things from you guys. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks very much. Thank you for having me.